So there was some kind of reference back to like the Rays Hines deal, which I was asked before, maybe to just play a quick catch up. So the deal is dead. The city and the Rays are currently, legally, formally unwinding the deal, but it's over. And that's kind of it. And then Mayor Ken Welch wants to move forward with kind of gas plant 2.0, a new version of the gas plant, and I think this conversation maybe kind of sets the ground for that. So my next question there is, who should develop the gas plant? Should the city be the master developer? Should it bring in one developer? Should there be a mix? How do you go about that? How should it be executed? Yeah, we'll start with you.
So easy for me to answer because I have no idea. I think you definitely don't want everything to look the same. The question of whether you could have a master developer who then subcontracts out, it's a little bit more on the project management and construction side that I'm used to dealing with. So I'm going to pass to people who have more expertise.
I think the answer would probably be somewhere in the middle. I don't think the city has the requisite expertise on staff. And I also think that if you went to a master developer, you risk the battery situation there where you have a single vision that is sort of executed down the line. I think somewhere in the middle where you have a plan that maybe is done by a master planner but is executed by a number of different entities, again, local, state, and nationally based developers that could reflect that interest and give us a sense of variety up and down the project.
Okay.
I agree. I also would like to see more community-based organizations involved in the planning, and maybe groups like the APA, USGBC, volunteers on that level that do a lot of that work, professionals from the built environment community and architecture and transportation. It has to be a collective effort. You have to connect the disconnected fields and groups, whether that's public health professionals, transportation experts. Everyone plays a role. Everyone has a part. Whatever your expertise is, you should be bringing that to the table. There shouldn't be one entity making all the decisions for all of us. Collectively and cooperatively, we should all be making the decision.
So before we get to you, Jillian, you're a contractor. Is that feasible? How could that work out?
You need a master developer. If you are going to pull off what could be a multi-billion-dollar development, you need somebody overseeing utility work, roadways, infrastructure, safety. I mean, there's the idea that you could come in and do it internally in the city or with community groups is difficult because just the sheer amount of capital required. I mean, these are people that are putting up hundreds of millions of dollars to just get things out of the ground and putting their capital at risk at a project that is highly risky, that requires significant expertise, and frankly is a political football. So to mitigate all of those concerns, you have to have somebody with just a deep bench and deep pockets. And that's not to say that you couldn't have a significant component with community involvement or that local groups couldn't be a part of the conversation. And I think requirements should dictate in the RFP that would be required. But putting all the pieces together on a property this large with this much at stake, you've got to have an expert.
If I could just add to that, we spent a long time building a community benefits agreement. A lot of people in this room put a lot of effort and energy into building an advisory council, one around the community benefits agreement and around the CRA, the 10th anniversary coming up, by the way. So again, it's an opportunity for us to revisit that as well as we look forward to the next steps. But there's a community benefits agreement already in place, although it may have been diluted and watered down from what it originally was meant to be so that this development could take place. But there are parameters, and what we need to do is revisit those and re-strengthen those again with the community input and the community support. Yes, we need what you're saying, but without the community benefits agreement, without guardrails to make sure that this time the community is a part of every step of this, it's not going to work.
Erica, I was not a part of the CBA when that got off the ground. I'm actually very curious how you think it could work better.
Whew, that's a loaded question, but for the people, I don't want to speak for others, but for the people that were a part of the negotiations and part of these advisory council and the discussion and the committee, it just needed, one, more community participation and involvement, whether that's from the neighborhood associations that the development affects throughout that community, or community residents and members itself. It should have been a multi-disciplined advisory council, not just business people, not just developers, not just Chamber of Commerce, but it should have been more inclusive, in my opinion. So if we want to revisit that and truly make it a CBA, then it has to be a CBA, Community Benefits Agreement.
Go ahead, Peter.
But in order to get to any agreement, we have to be negotiating with somebody across the table. And one of the ways we might be able to do that is through an organization like ULI, which Jillian is part of. There's precedent for that. ULI does what's called a TAPS program, a Technical Assistance Program. They actually helped us create our downtown waterfront master plan years ago. So an outside entity like that could come in and provide some outside, a bit of distance, and an outside perspective. And of course, that part of that process is, of course, actually conversing with the locals and taking all that information into account. So there is precedent for bringing in someone outside to help us just at least get the RFP process started.
What do you think, Dr. Strom?
About the CBA?
No, just about bringing in, an outside process. Like, do you think there should be some kind of like outside counsel or outside consultant?
I mean, I think you're definitely going to be bringing in, whether it's a master planner or consultants, and if you want to have people who have experience working with projects at this scale, you probably have to go outside of Tampa Bay. That's, but most of big projects, even the Raise Hines project, if you saw the list of people who were involved, I mean, there was a dozen or more that included affordable housing developers, local people, national people, international people, and so I think it's not an either or. You could have, if indeed, and I trust our expert here on construction about whether you need a master developer. That makes a lot of sense to me, that you need someone good at project management, but there's no reason they can't outsource parts of that project, whether it's geographically parts of the project or sort of, community input. It's not realistic to have, nonprofits need to be involved in part of the development. It's not realistic to say to nonprofits, there's a bunch of land here, so you go do your thing. They just don't have the capacity to do that. So it needs to fit into some kind of a structure that's provided by the city in cooperation with someone who's overseeing the whole project.
Thank you.